Desperate Times is a video game I made in 2016. It's a bullet hell space shooter roguelite and has this gimmick where, when you run out of ammo in your gun, you are randomly selected a new gun to get, sometimes with modifiers, so after your pea shooter you could get a sword gun or a mortar, and your mortar could instead be a hyper mortar or a disarming mortar, or a hyper giant disarming explosive mortar. DT was mostly inspired by another game called Steriden, and since then I've made a similar game called Fisticuffs, and both of those make for good points of comparison. Desperate Times looks pretty generic, and it is not clear at first glance what its hook is. There is no obvious reason for someone to buy DT as opposed to Steriden, which is more professional in its presentation, or Fisticuffs, which is an unusual mix of fishing and action. What I learn is that it's wise to make the unique aspects of a game completely clear from the word go, make its hook plain as day for all to see. The name is also super generic and makes it very difficult to search for, even if you have heard of this game and know that it's called Desperate Times. One of the most obvious things about this game is that it's got tons of bullets, it's very flashy like that. This is doubtless a great boon and makes the game look more appealing to onlookers. Many people told me as such when I was making it, so spectacle is something that clearly has a lot of value, and while making Desperate Times I stumbled into this benefit. My attempts to market this game and seek its audience didn't go much further than posting some GIFs on Discord and emailing some YouTubers. To this day I still don't know what else there is to be done other than perhaps Reddit posting the same way Jake Friend does. I understand that a good hook, as aforementioned, is also a good marketing method unto itself. Desperate Times has this cool XP system where you gain XP from all kills, and you have 2 XP bars. If the first one is full, then you can press X to re-roll your weapon at the cost of 1 bar of XP. If both bars are full, then you have a shield to absorb 1 hit, also at the cost of 1 bar. Certainly an idea worth copying and modifying in other games, methinks. Interesting note though, this system is barely communicated to the player. They're left to figure it out for themselves. I like this obtuseness and would certainly do it again, and have done it again, with some of the obtuse mechanics in Fisticuffs. On the other hand, you have shields on some enemies, which are garbage. When an enemy has a shield, it essentially means it just has extra HP. How much extra HP is never specified, and is different from one shield to the next. Makes shielded enemies rather annoying to fight since they just don't die. Similar to this is the fact that some enemies shoot in different patterns. Sometimes it's hard to know what to expect. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone complain about this, but it's certainly something I would shy away from these days. Making these waves of enemies in Game Maker was annoying as hell. For each wave, I wrote out lines of code to spawn each enemy. Like if I wanted a line of enemies, I would look at the exact coordinates I wanted the line to start and end, and make a for loop that went from one end of the line to the other, spawning an enemy every however many pixels, with no way to visualize the wave until actually playing it. What's more, some waves ended up being super long, especially in the later levels, which I'm not keen on. You would also have some situations where an enemy survives off the top or bottom of the screen and the next wave isn't spawned until all enemies are dead, so you'd have nothing to do for 5 or 10 seconds. Fisticuffs' system is a vast improvement. I made it in Godot, where it's easier to make the waves visually and they spawn every several seconds, regardless of if any enemies are alive or not. The music's well good, but I didn't make it. Sound effects, I like them too, and I did in fact make them, using one of them SFXR inspired thingies. One thing I look back on with blue tinted glasses is the lack of distinct upgrades. There are only really a few meaningful things you can get during a run of Desperate Times, the first obviously being weapons, which you lose as fast as you gain. Another of these is the upgrades that you can get from cargo ships. There's not many different upgrades that you can get, and as a result your runs don't end up being very distinct. Compare Fisticuffs, where there's many tens of upgrades with meaningful distinction between a run based around AoE or single target damage, defense, riches, or rare items like necromancy. Steriden 2 has this concept of different ways to build your run, these based around the different weapon types. You can get an upgrade that buffs only bot weapons, for instance. One thing I have not done in Desperate Times, and probably should have, is any kind of unlock that persists between runs. I rather like the way Risk of Rain does this, wherein you unlock various characters and artifacts, which change the way you play without exactly acting as an upgrade, unless you're talking about Artifact of Command. I have since done a little of this in Fisticuffs with hard mode, which unlocks after you have won easy mode, but I think the door is wide open to add more of that kind of stuff. The reason you want this kind of thing is for additional incentive for folks to continue playing even after they've won a run of the game. If you win Desperate Times, there's not really anything new to see. If there were an alternate ship you could now use, or a hard mode, or a new suite of weapons, there would be much more reason for someone to press restart rather than quit. Also, the colour palette of Desperate Times is DB32, which is a general palette with many colours. I prefer the approach I took with Fisticuffs, a tiny palette specifically for the game. So pretty much, if I want to make a game like this again, which I probably do, the thing to do is pick an attention-grabbing name and premise, have the enemy types be more consistent in health and behaviour, and to create a system of upgrades where people can experience many different ways of playing, and some way for them to influence which upgrades they get. Having stuff which unlocks over time, like alternate characters, would also be a boon. Right, well, that's that. Bye. Whee!